Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of TRCOA's Behind the Groove. If you're here live, please introduce yourself and ask questions in the chat as we go along. This episode is sponsored by Stinson Recording Studios. Also, if you find this content useful, please like this video, and if you are new, please subscribe to our channel. We make new content every week. Today, we are very proud to have Tim Palmer. He is going to review his remix of the band Beauty and Chaos. Tim is one of the most renowned producer, engineers, and music industry leaders of our time, and from 1979 to now has worked with so many major artists that we can't begin to list them all. Without further ado, Tim Palmer.
Good evening to you all. Thank you for coming to this webinar. Tonight, I plan to talk about how I would approach a remix. These are strange times that we're in with the COVID-19, and I appreciate the fact that it's a little different for you, but rest assured we will be back. But in the meantime, let's do this. What is a 12-inch mix? What is a remix? I came from the 80s, as you know. I may look young, but I'm actually a lot older than I seem. In the 80s, when you finished the production of a song, it was expected of you to create a remix, a 12-inch remix. And in that remix, you expanded upon the production of the song and introduced new elements or revealed elements that were part of the production so that people could enjoy them. Now, of course, nobody buys 12-inch remixes anymore, and we don't actually have records at all. But occasionally, you're still asked to create a remix version of a song. So tonight I'm going to talk about how I approached a remix of a song very recently for a band called Beauty and Chaos. Now, Beauty and Chaos is a group of musicians who've gathered together, and they are consisting of members of The Cure, Ministry, The Mission, who are a band that I worked with a lot, and even artists such as Ice-T. And they came to me originally to do some mixing, but what happened was when I did my mixing, I started to add new elements, and in the end, they decided that these would be better to create a separate album, which was going to be a re-envisioned version of their album, which was all remixes. So I've been doing quite a lot of remixes for Beauty and Chaos, and the album is available on the usual streaming platforms, so have a listen. Anyway, this first song that I'm going to play for you, what I'll do is, it's called The Outside, and it features a vocalist called Ashton Knight. I'll play you a little bit of what I was presented first so that you get a sense of the song, and then I'll show you how I approached it. So this is the song as it was presented to me first. Let's make sure I'm on the right things here. Okay, so you can get a sense of the song from what they sent me. So my job is obviously to reinterpret that song and try and do something different with it. when you're doing that, obviously you have to be concerned with the general genre of the music that you're trying to create. There's no point in taking it off too far at a tangent, otherwise the artist is going to feel very alienated from his own music. So for me, that song spoke of Depeche Mode, alternative music, The Cure, all those sort of classic sort of gothy alternative bands. So what I tend to do when I'm in this situation is I'll get a basic balance up of the music, and I will play around with just the simple elements of the key, because I've got to find out where everything's sort of sitting in. So I want to find out what the key is, and I want to find out about the basic rhythm. So the first thing I wanted to do was at the intro, I thought it would be really important to come up with a stronger sort of motif, some sort of riff. So I'll start to unveil my version of the song now, and you can hear how the elements came together. We'll start with the intro first. So in the intro here, we have this now. Okay, I'll stop it there. So I think there's two parts to your brain, essentially. We all know that, the left and the right brain. So what I tend to do is I'll sort of concentrate on the right side of the brain, which is your imagination and rhythm and the artistic side of the brain. And then once I have got a few ideas together, then I'll switch over to the left side of the brain and I'll start sequencing, organizing the mathematical side of it. So I don't sort of bog myself down too much at the beginning with the EQ, with the compression, with the delays. I just come up with thoughts and ideas, and I get as much down as I can. I use as many toys and as things that I have around me as possible to do that. I have here a Nova basic keyboard, which I use with various soft synths. I have my guitars here, I have a Kemper amp, I have percussion, I have various guitar pedals, and obviously I have my vocal mic if I want to try anything like that. So the first thing I did with this song was I thought about the rhythm, and I thought, well, you know, they have their sort of traditional rock sound. It would be nice if I introduced some sort of programmed elements to that. So I'll solo up some of the things that I created. Let's put it into the input. So these loops are working on top of the big drums at this point, like. There they are on their own. So what I did was I took out the original drums completely in the verses and just went to programming. But for the intro, I tried to make a combination of them both. And the way that I got to that was literally as simple as creating a loop on a soft synth and going through the many presets until I found something that I thought was appealing. And this particular loop, this one, seemed to work really well to me with the drums. So that's how I ended up with that. So starting at the rhythmic side of it really helps because it sets a precedent for how you think you're going to go. I mean, once you've got the rhythm right, you can start thinking, okay, well then maybe what they had on the bass was too flat, too linear, so you start coming up with your own bass lines and things like that. But you've got to start somewhere. So as I said, I start just playing around, and the rhythm aspect was the first thing that I got to. One thing that I will point out is I will answer questions. So please, if there's anything that's not making any sense at all, please send me a question on the YouTube site, and I will monitor the questions and I can refer to them as I go along. The toys, playing around, stuff like that. I mean, there's so many soft synths nowadays that you can work with. I've got the drums going here. The next thing that I was looking for was literally something that would be, you know, something to make it mine. And I found through the Contact plugin, which I'll show you in a minute, was basically that. So those things were literally based through this particular thing called Contact, and there's various sounds like reverse sounds, voice sounds, stuff like that, and I find it really useful because you can literally play around until you find bits that you like and then chop them up. So I, you know, found a little sequencer there. That's the basic sequencer. Chopped it up into a couple of bars. And that becomes like a little theme that I can use with the drums, as you can tell. So this is my intro now. My intro with these particular sounds. And this is how the song begins. Once again, as I said at the beginning, these sounds that I found there were literally by trial and error and finding something, looking for something that inspired me, just playing around with going through the presets until I found some things that worked. And there's a question that's come up here. Did the session already come to me synced in Pro Tools? Yes, it did. I had a Pro Tools session with basic stems that were on the grid. So that made things a lot simpler for me. So I could mute things and take them out and then be able to add my own stuff. So that's the early part of that. Now, obviously the motif, I wanted to come up with something that I thought would be, you know, the defining riff of the song. So let's switch over to this. I've got my guitar here. So that was the first thing that came into my mind, was a simple sort of gothy type. So I tried that, and as you'll hear, that's the riff that I put down. You don't have to be the greatest guitar player in the world, as you can see that I'm not, but with the use of Pro Tools, you can get away with murder. So I basically put down a few times, and I then doubled it, and then once I got to the other side of the brain, then I started to add the effects, which is why it sounds so much more glorious than it does with me just playing it now. So you'll hear how that riff works in the track. If I solo it up now, here you go. So once you've got a motif like that, then everything starts falling into place. Then that can reappear in the reintro, but you know that you have your theme. So it becomes like a little bit like a domino effect. Once things start falling into place, you think, oh, okay, well, now that's there. I can then take the drums out. So my approach then was to simplify the verse. Instead of it being so linear and flat, I went down in the verse, and you'll hear what I mean. I'll go back to playing you the original version verse, which was like this.
I slide below and still I'm falling. I've lost another friend.
So you can see how that's sounding. And then my verse, I stripped it back down. So you can see it's a lot emptier really. And once I'd taken out the original bass, of course, then you start getting into sequencing your own bass. And that's not that hard to do nowadays with Pro Tools. I mean, as I said, as a non-musician like myself, I found that fairly easy. So I started to program up some sort of bass. You'll see what I mean, which is here. I've got the basses up here for you. Fairly straight ahead, very 80s, very Depeche Mode type synthy sounds. There's a couple of octaves in there. And then on top of that, what I decided to do was play a real bass. So I added myself playing on top of that, you see. So you can see that works nicely with the drums. So once you start to establish some sort of framework to what you're doing, you can introduce elements of what they already had recorded before. And I'm using little pieces of the original guitars, and I'm using little pieces of the guitars that I've added. But there's a question here that came up that's saying, at what point in your creativity do you automate the most? Well, because everything's on the grid, it's quite simple to be able to find sections, mute parts, and bring them in and out. But as I said before, when I start to get to the real mixing at the latter part. The beginning part is all about trying to be creative and have as much fun with it as you can, finding things that are going to really, bring something to the table. Because essentially, when you work with a song, the song's either great or it isn't. I mean, you can't fool yourself. You're putting it into a different set of clothes, and you're, presenting it in a different way. So, this is your job as the remixer, is to be able to present the song to the artist and say, hey, this could be cool. So let's have a look here. What else? Where are we going from here? So we got the bass and we have the drums. It's very important not to lose the essence of the song. I think if you start taking, as I said at the beginning, if you start taking it too far, you're going to get yourself in trouble. This session that I have here is towards the end of the mix, so I can't show you in its more rugged form. But you can see with things like the riff guitar, if I solo the individual ones, the first guitar, it's a pretty clean guitar. I mean, that's probably the one that I was playing along with here. It's a Kemper sound, it's a clean sound, it's got some delay on it. But there's a plugin here called Super VHS. I'm not sure if you know that one. It's a new plugin. It's a cheap plugin, and it's made by Baby Audio, and I love it. I'm really into it at the minute. I use it on everything. But you can hear it without here. And then you add this and you get you basically can control the amount of heat, which is sort of distortion, and then you can add drift, so that the sort of modulation of the sound, the notes start drifting a little, like a VHS, which is why it's called Super VHS. And then you have an amount of wash that you can add. You can really take it to the back if you want. So that was the basic riff, and then I doubled it with a second sound, which I treated differently again, which would be... It's basically just a nastier version of the first one. And then a third one is... So I put the octave up on, which I always love to do. This plugin here that I've got open on the screen, I hope you can see it now, is called Spiff. And what I like about it is you can take out all the nastiness of the click of the front of the note so that you get a better blend. I'll show you without and with. You can basically boost or cut. So I'll show you boosted. So you really don't want to hear all that shit in there. So switch it to cut, and then it becomes a very round, organic sort of thing, and then you can blend it in with your performances and end up with this. Depending on what sort of song you're working on, sometimes you want all that extra noise, but a lot of the time having 3 or 4 transient peaks hitting at a different time is not such a good thing. So you choose the transient that you want, and then you can smooth off the others. And that particular plugin's Spiff is actually, I found it to be very useful. It's easy to become too precious, and something that I've learned, and it's become more prominent in mixing every day for me now, is although we're discussing tonight the idea of a remix where we go to the extreme, I don't think as a mixing engineer that you should ever be afraid of, if you hear something that you think could improve a song, you should just do it. You have nothing to lose. Everything that you suggest when you send a mix to an artist, I always write on the email, hey, look, if you don't like that extra part I added, it's only 1 mute away from being gone. So, always feel that you can express yourself in the mixing, because a lot of the time artists nowadays don't have the money or the time to be able to refine the craft. That, in the 80s and 90s, where we had huge recording budgets, we could try this, try that, try this amp, move the drums over here, try an orchestra. I mean, it was crazy. But now people are trying to make music and make it on a budget. So if in the mix stage, if you think, oh, I know what would be nice here. It'd be really nice if I doubled that guitar with a tremolo guitar and put a high string in the second half of the verse, then do it. Why not? The worst that can happen is they say, can you take it off, please? But you really do have to follow your gut. And it's a hard thing to do sometimes, because you get worried if you're going to offend the artist. But if you, as I said, if you make it clear that you've done a few things and they can take them out if you don't like them, then they're usually very appreciative of the fact that you've spent that extra time. The first time that happened to me, I remember, was when I was working with U2. I was working with a song called The Ground Beneath Her Feet, and they sent me all the stuff, and I got a phone call from Bono, and he told me, we really don't like the drums. And I didn't know what he was actually talking about at that point because I hadn't actually opened the session. So I just said, okay, no problem, I'll see what I can do. So what I've decided after listening to the recorded material was that he didn't like the programmed element of the drums and that he wanted to adjust that in some form. So I literally rented a snare drum and a couple of cymbals, and I created a loop, a sort of a Lou Reed Walk on the Wild Side loop, put that in, added a few cymbals here and there, and muted the electronic drums and just brought them in now and again. So I sort of changed the arrangement and basically replayed the drums. And I was very concerned because it was the first proper mix that I'd done for U2 that they would be extremely offended and Larry would walk off with a hissy fit, but they really liked it and it worked well for me. So, you know, it's important that you take chances sometimes. Let me show you some other stuff that's going on in this song. Okay, so this is the original guitar part in the chorus. So it's good, it's strong and it's powerful. So I hear notes in there that I wanted to bring out, so I added this to that. Here we go. Now I'll play you them both together. And then the riff appears straight afterwards. So the sounds in the chorus are actually the same sounds that I use for the riff, the same doubles and the same octaves. But I think it gives it a sort of an orchestral feeling, you know, it's very dramatic, which I think works for the song. Let's have a look what else we've got going on here. Okay, so we've reached verse 2. So something needs to change in verse 2, something needs to lift it up. We've got a similar sort of groove going on in the drums. So maybe add some shaker. You know, we've got some shakers going on now, which is easy to just chuck on and loop them up. Always have your percussion handy. That adds to verse 2 nicely. And we also, maybe something to drive the song along just a little more. So maybe we need another guitar. So I thought, you know, an obvious thing to do would be some sort of funky little simple thing. It could be in the lows, but I think I went for a higher one. So, as I said before, you don't have to be the greatest guitar player in the world, as you can probably see from the screen there. That's very looped, and there's nothing wrong with that. On that, I've once again taken off some of the clunk with the spiff, Then I've also added some drive and a bit more wash with the Super VHS. It's a little bit of compression on the SSL going on there. And then at the end of that, I have a plugin called Wow, which I love, which is really fun. You can really, it's like a wah-wah, but you can find almost like voice-like qualities in things.
But I can't wait until the morning, and all will be redeemed.
It just gives a little drive to the second verse, which I think is important, you know. So that's the second verse. Maybe it's a good time to talk about some of the vocal effects that are going on here. I'm trying to squash him down, so we've got...
Here we go again.
The first go-to plugin I use for my vocals is always this plugin called DAD Tape. It's made by DUI, it's a Spanish company, and they're really slow to respond if you ever have any technical issues. But I really like it because coming up through the analog era, there's certain frequencies in things that I find just very uncomfortable, very digital. I call it digital naughtiness. And if I put the DAD tape on, I find that I can lose some of that. So quite often I'll start with that. So I have my tape simulator on, and then I'm using the Pro Q3 Fab filter to roll off some low end. You need to get rid of the lows a lot of the time. If I'm trying to get a big vocal sound, sometimes I'll literally go through a whole vocal track and individually get rid of the bass bumps on certain words. But in this case, I could just roll it off generally. So that's what I've got going on there. Then we have this thing called the Retro Color plugin, which is great.
I slide below and still I'm full.
There's so much you can do with this thing, and it's not an expensive plugin, but you've got distortion, you've got space, you've got noises, you've got wobble. This is called digital texture, and I just really love it.
Here we go again.
And then without it,
here we go again.
It loses some of the low end, but not in a bad way. And then I'm going back to the old faithful, the Super VHS.
Here we go again.
This is without.
I slide below and still I'm falling. I've lost it.
It's actually making it a lot more stereo in this particular case. And then for the delays, I also have another plugin called Comeback Kid, which is another baby audio plugin actually. And you know, the nice thing about these particular plugins is you don't feel like you have to be always spending a lot of money, because these are not expensive plugins and they're really cool. It's a very controllable delay. You can change the pitch of the wobble of the delay. You can have it ducking around the vocal. So sometimes, you know, you delay, you want it to come up around the vocal phrases. This does that for you. It has the dry out signal. You can You can adjust the EQ of the return of the signal, so you get a much smaller delay, stuff like that. So it's actually a really great plugin, and as I said, not expensive. So
Here we go again.
And that's without.
Here we go again. I slide it.
I've gone through and I've chopped off a lot of the breaths and stuff because I'd rather hear some of the delay tails than the breaths themselves, but that's just a personal taste thing.
Here we go again. I slide below and still I'm falling. I've lost another friend. Oh, I don't know why. I don't know why.
Okay, here's something that I also did in the vocals, which I think was fun, and by no means is it completely original, but I still love it. So I got a vocoder, and I'm not the best with a lot of this technology, so what I did was I just got a basic vocoder, and I found the tonality that I wanted, and I ran the vocal through it. You can hear it here. So that's a straight vocal into the vocoder. So once I'd got once I'd found the tonality that I wanted, I then committed that sound, and then what I did was I then put it into Melodyne and then chose what notes I wanted. So I was able to sort of tune and make the vocoder follow the melody in the tune that I wanted to hear. So I'll show you that. Oh no, your worst nightmares happen. Pro Tools has quit. Okay, well, we'll start it up again. Today at 8:04. So let me look at my notes. Any questions on here that I should be answering? At what point do you automate your things? How often do clients upset? Well, clients generally are pretty, as I said, pretty open-minded. Some people are obviously, sticklers to what they've done, but I'd say that 80 to 90% of the time, clients are happy with the fact that you've been prepared to take their song to the extra mile, which is what they want from you. In the 80s and 90s, producers and engineers had spent hours and hours refining how they wanted the sound to be. So mixing was more of a balancing. It was literally you were a balance engineer. But since then, because of the nature of the funding of records, people often are looking for you to take it to the next level. So I would never be afraid of that. Hopefully this will open up fast. Here we go, there you go. That's not so bad. So once the vocal was put into Melodyne, make that active, then I could then just write in the notes that I wanted, and I can show you that here. So there's them, you can see the Melodyne here. So if you put that with the lead vocal, you'll see what's going on.
It's not what it seems. Another chance to break the future. I may not succeed, but I'm not giving up. No.
So there you go. It's giving it just a little extra texture for the second half of the verses, which I think works really well, especially in the track, because it's like a little build, looking through the verses, you're just taking things to the next level and building halfway through points, which I think is good. Works pretty well. As far as the basic sequencing, as I said, it's all done with non-expensive plugins. I have various sequences going on through here. So it's just those. As I mentioned at the beginning, I think having your room set up so that you can get to things quite simply is a big bonus. As you can see, I don't know if it comes across on the camera, but I have a Kemper amplifier here, which is really very, very easy to be able to get to sounds very quickly. And, you know, that's very important to me because I need to be able to access things. Hang on, let's get to that. Where am I not hearing that? Oh, I know why it's unplugged. The other thing I've got is, I find that's useful, is playing around with the concept of like just bits of feedback and things like that. This particular guitar has something called a Sustainiac pickup on it, and I love it because it sort of replaces one of these, which is the electronic bow. But you can hear that it's very, very controllable, and within a small studio like mine I don't have to have big Marshall amps to be able to get feedback, and you can control the pitch of the notes even. You can keep it on one level and then you can switch it up the octave or back down. I mean, this is a clean sound as well. If you had it on a heavy sound, you'd hear what I mean. It's an amazing thing to have. And of course, you know, the little EBow was what we did in the 80s. So surround yourself with as many toys as you can, because at the first part of the recording, when you're using that right side of the brain, you can get some pretty crazy stuff going on, and then you can start to formulate your plan of attack of how you're going to make it all work within the song. But it's not a quick process, I can't deny. Sometimes I can spend 2 or 3 days doing this sort of stuff now, which in the days of the traditional studio, that would have been too expensive. But now that people have and can afford their own little studios, whether it be on a laptop or whether it be in a room like mine, it gives you the time to be able to get it right. And I think being able to not compromise what you do is such an important and valuable part of everything. Let me see what else I can find on this track to show you as part of the remix process. There's a good question that's just come in onto the chat here. It's asking me what methods do I use to inspire artists to work with me. Basically, we're all slaves to social media these days, so it's very important that you post about what you're doing and what you have done and keep people constantly aware. I mean, even here you go, I'll do it right now. Please follow me on Tim Palmer Mixer on Instagram or on Facebook. Tim Palmer on Facebook, Tim Palmer Mixer on Instagram, Tim Palmer Mixer on Twitter. You need to get people to be aware of what you're doing and to constantly update them on stuff because, the days of looking at an album sleeve and seeing the credits and thinking I'd like to work with that guy are totally gone. So a good example is last week I had an album released by a band called the Psychedelic Furs, a band that I've loved for many years, and it was their first record in about 25 years. So as soon as the press started happening for it, I was reposting, because you have to. It sort of feels a little bit weird talking about yourself so much, but you need to do that to be able to have a career. So don't be afraid to post things about what you do. And I posted a snapshot of the Pearl Jam album that I mixed, and the Psychedelic Furs album was right next to it. And I talked about how these records were 30 years apart. It's sort of a weird feeling having to sort of be, as they say, with a hashtag humble brag, but you need to do it. Don't be afraid to do that. And anyway, as I said, please do follow me. And I sincerely hope that you guys get something from this. I'm grateful for you for taking the time to listen. It's been enjoyable. It's strange to look at a camera and not have any response. Usually I can at least look at the reaction of people's faces, but that's not possible now with COVID-19 and these webinars. But still, I've had a good time, and I hope that you've learned something from this. And as I said, thank you very much indeed for being with us this evening on the webinar, and work hard at the Recording Conservatory of Austin. Thank you.
Thanks everybody for watching. If you found this content useful, please like this video. It will tell YouTube to show it to others. If you are enrolled, please go to the Seminars tab on the my.trcoa website and take the quiz over tonight's lesson. And if you need to book one-on-one time with an instructor, text 512-231-0344. If you aren't enrolled, go to trcoa.edu to find out more information about what we do. Also, please post in the chat subjects you'd like to see for our upcoming live streams. And as always, subscribe to our channel, and we'll see you guys on the flip side. Bye, everybody.